We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Your secrets, if you really look at yourself, you would be speechless. What happened to being doctors and teachers? What happened to being your brother's keeper? Nowadays,
Y'all, it's your boy Mr.BandClap, and we in the building with our third and final part of this podcast that I've been doing about Aaliyah and Akasha and all of that. So this podcast, I'm just going to be talking about some things that Akasha wanted me to make known to you all, and a little bit on that last six, which Aaliyah didn't get a chance to do in this world, but the last six, meaning motherhood, meaning being a wife, all of those type of things. So we got a lot to talk about, y'all. So let's get the show on the road.
Listen good to my reply. Come here, little man, let me talk with you. See if I can paint for you the large picture. Congrats, cause you made it out your mama house. I hope you make enough to buy your mama house. I see you watch Icy in your whip form. I got some good advice, never quit torn. Cause that's the way we eat here in this rap game. I'm fucking with your funky little rap name.
Alright, y'all, so we back. Welcome to another BandClap TV podcast. Once again, before I get started, I actually got a couple things that I want to run by you all. First thing is, with the help of a lot of my fans from Facebook, as well as a lot of fans that I've been receiving from Masterly Foolish, my YouTube channel has grown to over 500 subscribers. And I just received the email a couple days ago from YouTube talking about I reached a milestone with 500 subscribers. So I want to, from the bottom of my heart, extend my gratitude and my appreciation out to all of the subscribers that I receive from all the platforms that I post these podcasts on. And I just want to thank you all for subscribing to my YouTube channel. And this isn't the end, you know, this is the beginning. So I'm at 500 right now, but I want that number to keep rising and rising and rising. And also I want to give another shout out to the subscribers that donated to my Cash App as well as PayPal. I really appreciate you all for thinking of me enough to donate so that I can keep making these podcasts greater and greater. And last but not least, after this podcast, I want to start doing interviews again, as far as with artists and things like that, because those are the things that I used to do on my channel before I started with the spirituality stuff. So if there's any artists, musicians, any producers that's out in the Orlando, Florida area and you would like to be interviewed for my podcast, just let me know and I'll be happy to interview you. Now, just putting this out here, all of the artists that I've interviewed in the past have very, very phenomenal type of music. So I want to keep that going. So if you feel like that your music is on that polished, super influential and inspirational level, then let me know. I'll put my information below in the description so you all can reach out to me with your inquiries, and I'll get back with you once I listen to your music and I feel like that it's a good fit for the channel that I have. So as you all know, this was the last podcast in the 3-part series where I was talking about how Aaliyah went through the 3 steps to become the goddess that she is now in the spiritual plane, even though she wasn't able to acquire her 3rd and last 6 until after death, because on a spiritual aspect she did complete all 3 sixes, because when you look at Akasha, she is the mother of all vampires. So with her alone being Akasha, she's already the mother goddess slash queen in the underworld. It's just that she wasn't alive long enough for that energy to play out on earth. So since this is the last podcast dealing with this, I'm going to start it off with a interview that Aaliyah did sometime in mid-July, right before she died. And in this interview she talked about a lot of things, and mind you, I literally found this and pulled it up like right now. So the fact that the stuff that she's talking about in this interview falls directly in line with the stuff that I was talking about with her through these last 2 podcasts is another confirmation that Aaliyah's spirit is the spirit that I've been channeling this whole time. So in this interview she talks about a dream, like a reoccurring dream that she has, and when I tell you, this really kind of sent chills up my spine, because it really seems like when it comes to the Most High's chosen people, or even if you're just a melanated person who's unlocked certain faculties within your body so that the spirit can openly communicate with you, just about every single artist or entertainer or whatever who's had a higher purpose, it seems like with all of them, when it was time for them to die, they all knew in some shape shape, form, or fashion. Like they got either some type of warning, or they had some type of dream, or they had some type of premonition that they wasn't going to be here too long, or that they're about to die. I mean, just a few examples. Look at Michael Jackson. His last show was called This Is It. And when you really look at that show and you look at the practices, because really that's all they were just him practicing the shows. Like he wasn't even able to go out and perform at full power due to him dying so soon. But when you look at Michael Jackson in that movie, you see that even though it was just practice, you see that Michael Jackson, for the most part, was putting in just about the same type of energy as if it was the actual show. So it raises the question as, did Michael Jackson know that he was about to die before he could even go on tour? Or did he feel like that he would die before the tour was finished, and that's why he called it This Is It? I mean, I don't believe in coincidences. Now, let's look at Tupac. And we really don't need to harp on Tupac too long, because most of the stuff that he made in his last days all talked about him dying soon. All talked about him not being here and his music living on. I mean, there's many sources and documentaries and videos and things that came out during that time talking about how in Tupac's last days, how he would just lock himself up in the studio and make song after song after song after song. And when people asked him, why are you making all of this music like this? And his answer was, because I know I'm about to die soon and I want this music to live on after I'm dead. So is it a coincidence that he named his albums the way that he did because he already knew way beforehand that he was about to die soon? I mean, let's talk about it. Let's talk about Biggie, because just like how Aaliyah knew a lot of things about the occult, Biggie, he did too. He was just super low-key about it. And one day I may do a podcast in the same fashion talking about Biggie too, but only if he chooses to spiritually communicate with me the same way that Aaliyah did. But technically, Biggie only put out one album while he was alive, which was Ready to Die. And that's really the album that he got the majority of his living success from. And then after he died, the album Life After Death came shortly after. So I really don't think that these are coincidences. And last but not least, we have Aaliyah's cousin, Lisa Left Eye Lopez, aka shout out to Tiffany Messenger. But if you're the type of person who really wants to get into the fairy kingdom, holla at Left Eye. But that's a whole nother podcast series. But even with Lisa Left Eye, not only did she have a vision about herself dying before it happened, I remember watching this article where even T-Boz had a premonition of a car accident the day that Left Eye died. And then on top of that, even before Left Eye left to go to Honduras, she was talking about how she may end up dying young, just like Tupac did. So as I always do, I'll put the sources below that I got this information from, and I'm just gonna read to y'all just a little bit of what she said in the transcript of this interview. So she says, I have a dream. It's dark in my favorite dream. Someone is after me. Don't know why. I got fear. Then suddenly I lift off. I fly away, far away. How do I feel now? It is like swimming in air, free and without any weight. No one can reach me. No one can touch me. It's a wonderful feeling. Otherwise, I'm alarmed by this dream somehow. What does it mean? That I want to escape from real life sometimes, but from what? From success or the pressure of show business? No, I enjoy every second of my fame. If I could rewind my life back to start, I wouldn't change a thing, honestly. She also said this as well. Retrospectively, many people may insinuate that I didn't have a real childhood. Well, that's a lie. My parents always took care of me and made sure that I had enough time to play. I missed nothing. In general, I grew up regularly. I was a normal girl, almost, because not every girl had her first stage experience at the age of 9. I remember this day exactly. A great wish became true as I joined a concert given by my aunt, Gladys Knight, in Las Vegas, but I was anxious. I was afraid of the audience, afraid to fail. My bashfulness obstructed me at the time. I love to escape into my dreams. So just with that small paragraph alone, it's pretty much showing you how spiritually mature and how spiritually powerful that Aaliyah was now becoming, because around this time, the energy of Akasha has made itself so much at home with her to the point where now she's starting to have these reoccurring dreams and a lot of past life premonitions, to the point where she's getting small memories of who she used to be in past lives. And even though she already had a good idea of who she wanted to be and what she wanted to be, with her teaming up with Akasha, spirit and soul wise, now she was in the process of getting ready to unlock her true potential on this plane, which is something that if it would have played out the way it was intended to, her presence on this earth would have been even more iconic. And just like how there was so many many good basketball players and so many good basketball teams that was playing in the 90s when Michael Jordan was winning those back-to-back playoff championships. It would have been the same situation with Aaliyah. If she would have stayed alive, made this final transformation on earth, and became that queen of R&B that we all know that she would have been, a lot of your favorite R&B artists that's pedestalized to this day would have still made a good impact in the music industry, but for the most part they would have been in her shadow. So industry wise, she had to go, because with her passing like she did, it gave a chance for a lot of other R&B and soul type of artists to get that spotlight and make that impact that you see today. Now let's get into numerology for a minute. Aaliyah died on August the 25th 2001. Now you already know what to do. When we add the 8 plus 2 plus 5 plus 2 plus 1, it gives us 18. 8 plus 1 is 9. Now, when you talk about the number 9, that is a very, very telling number when you're talking about somebody's death date. And let me explain, because on my last podcast, we talked about how in the last years of her life, she represented the 8, even with her having the spirit of Akasha, which represents the number 8. So when we just look at the number 9 in general, the number 9 is the last number in the sequence of numbers. But another way to look at it as well, 9 also has a very dualistic nature, because 9 can also mean new beginnings as well. And just a little bit on what the number 9 means spiritual wise. The number 9 symbolizes love, faith, spiritual enlightenment, and spiritual awakening. It also represents karma, the universal spiritual laws, and it means that you are a natural light worker. Now when you look this up in a biblical sense, the number 9 means finality or judgment, and it is generally when at the time of judging a person. And also the number 9 is used to define the perfect movement of God. It is the number of patience, and check this out, it is also the number of those who accomplish the divine will. Let me say that one more time. The number 9 is the number of those who accomplish the divine will. So the question arises, did Aaliyah die too soon, or did she die right on time? Now side note, when I say die, y'all know I'm not talking about dying for real. I just mean leaving this earthly body. But when it came to that, there's a lot of things that Akasha pointed out to me when it comes to this, and some of this stuff I'll be able to explain, and some of it you'll just have to do your own research, because with a lot of this stuff I'm not really going to be able to go into full detail about certain things if you're not already in the know. And with the amount of responses and comments that I've been getting on my videos, I want to make a safe assumption that when I say certain things or certain terms or certain definitions that's been thrown around in the conscious community, that you all know what I'm talking about. So this is how Akasha explained this to me. Just like how on this earthly plane that we live on, under us we have a world, inside of us we have a world, and above us we have a world. And all of these worlds are interwoven together, kind of like a spider web. But the way the Most High created these things, everything is working in a perfect harmony, and everything is working in unison with each other. That's why it's called a universe. And to make sure that we on earth don't get too cluttered when it comes to these different universal beings, that's why we have these things called dimensions. Now there's a lot of different videos out there talking about the different dimensions that we have. Shout out to DoeLow The Pilotman, aka Flight Boss bitch, you know, for sure. And also shout out to young Pharaoh, Delbert Blair, shout out to Phil Valentine, because they all talk about these different dimensions and other beings in this universe that we share this planet with. And if you all have ever seen this movie called They Live, it's a very, very dope representation of how one thing can be perceived as something, and then when you go to another dimension, aka another form of reality, you see things for what they really are in your dimension. So just like how he was able to put on those glasses and he was able to see the books and see the billboards for what they really were, that's something that you can do as well with your third eye. And if your spirit and your soul is vibrating on a higher enough level, there are certain beings and there are certain spiritual messages that you'll now be able to have access to. Kind of like back in the day when you played Tekken and you would have to play the whole game defeating every single character including the boss, and when you get back to the character select screen you unlock a new character. So it's kind of like that. Now with all of that being said, it got to the point where Aaliyah started to realize that this 3D earth that we're living in isn't the end all be all, and with this spirit of Akasha, she's now able to astral travel and soul travel to these different places, and she's able to venture back into the past and see the different avatars or the different lives that she's played in on this earth. And in that interview, she talked about how she got so good at being able to astral travel and soul travel. She got so good at it that she was actually able to do a lot of this without sleeping. I mean, it got to the point where she was traveling through dimensions and things like that during the daytime. I mean, she would talk about how she'll be talking to you and having a normal conversation, but in her mind and in her heart of hearts, she's actually in a whole nother world doing something totally different while she's talking to you and having a regular conversation. She talks about how eventually she wanted to go to Egypt and she wanted to learn about Egyptology, and she wanted to learn about the ancient gods and goddesses like Cleopatra that ruled back then. Now, all of this that's going on with her is very beautiful. I mean, it's real dope, it's real nice, and it would have brought a type of love energy to the earth that in a lot of ways we really need it now when it comes to our music, and we're starting to slowly see it seep in. But there were some things that she told me about when it comes to this world that we live in and how unfortunate this can be when it comes to our celebrities. Now, like I said again, I hope that I can explain this in a good enough way for everybody to understand this right, because this goes out to all of my aspiring artists out there and people who have these god and goddess like paths and they want to get into the industry. Now, let me put this out here as a disclaimer. The industry in itself isn't all bad. I mean, you have artists who gracefully had a good career in the industry. I mean, we all have our ups and downs and bumps in the road and things like that, but you do have some very prevalent musicians in the industry who's living pretty well. They still got their sanity and they still got their dignity and all of that. But what I want to talk about a little bit is that other side of music, but I kind of want to talk about it without the spookism and all of this extra stuff that some of these conscious people be putting on it. Now, the way she explained it to me was, generally when you're born, you have 3 different paths that you're going to end up embarking on in one way or another. You have what you would call your default path, aka your systematic path. You have your life path, which is something that you can find if you add all of the numbers in your birth date together and simplify it. And that number that you come up with in the end, that's your life path. Or / also what could fit in that category is your astrological path, meaning when you was born, your parents got your natal chart and got a very trusted astrologist to break down that natal chart to the point where you pretty much have a very good idea of who your child is, what's that child's purpose of being on this earth, and last but not least, what is the mark that they're supposed to leave on this earth in death. And the third path is the enlightened path or the soul path. Now, for these examples, I'm only going to be talking about black people because it's a lot of us that don't know about this type of stuff and don't know about the importance of learning these type of things so that when you have children, you're able to rear them in the direction that they're supposed to go. Now, I'm going to show you a brief and very small timeline of how an average person will go through this path. And then I'm going to show you how Aaliyah went through this path and why she died so soon. Now, for a minute, let's just talk about the average person. Now, for the average boy and the average girl in a black household. Now, for good measure, let's just say that both parents are in the household, because with this example, it really don't matter. But if you really want to see the damage, take this example and amplify the negative part by 2. So when you're a baby, that's when your soul is still awake in your body. And from 0 to 7 years old, it's the part where the child is getting a lot more rebellious, but they're also a lot more impressionable at that age. And when they're talking about raising a child, people always say that from ages 0 to 7 years old is when you really have to monitor your child the most, because all of the information that they're receiving at these age periods is what's going to shape that child's overall mental psychology as well as personality. So for the average person, they're not going to know about natal charts and life paths and numerology and all of that kind of stuff. So by default, that child is going to learn about the systematic path or the default path, because for the most part, that's really all the dad knows and that's all the mom knows. So the more that child buys into that systematic path, and don't do anything to satisfy their life path or even their soul path, their soul starts to go to sleep, because it's kind of like when you're watching a boring movie or something that don't even pique your interest. You'll try to stay engaged for as long as you can, and you'll try to rebel against your body, but sooner or later you're going to give in and you're going to end up dozing off. So now that your soul is asleep, you're now only working on two paths, with the systematic / default path being your main path. Now, there's certain times and certain ages in your life where your soul kind of wakes up for a small second and take a peek and see what's going on. And every time your soul wakes up and takes a peek at what's going on, and you're living in that default systematic path that has nothing to do with your life path or your spiritual growth, you start to get more and more and more rebellious. And that's why you have a lot of these teens lashing out, and you have a lot of these young girls and young guys lashing out, because as a black man and as a black woman, let's look at this default systematic path as a Hostess cupcake with shit filling instead of cream filling. So a good analogy would be someone who's doing good on this default / systematic path. The icing or that ice is gonna look good and it's gonna taste good, and then for the most part the cake that you're gonna make, aka the money that you're gonna make, and the accolades that you're gonna receive when going through the systematic path are gonna feel good temporarily. But once you get to the feeling on the inside, which is going to be full of shit, it's going to get to the point where you're going to start feeling more and more and more and more sick. That's why you see a lot of these celebrities and a lot of these rich people committing suicide, and you're wondering how were they so successful and they made all this money and they got all this ice around their neck, and you seeing them in the rap videos and in the videos with these chicks, they got these cakes. But see, that's all you all can see on the outside. But these celebrities and these people who are in these positions where they're quote unquote doing successful in this default path, they don't tell you how much shit that they had to eat every time that cupcake was given to them. They're not telling you how riddled with parasites the inside of their body is from eating all that shit, because when a parasite attaches to you, you don't automatically start showing symptoms until way later on, when it's too late for anything to be done about it. Now, I'm going a little bit too forward with this, so let me backtrack a little bit. When we talk about this quote unquote default systematic path that was created by soulless beings, just with that definition alone, if you're a being on this earth that does have a soul, this systematic path is going to drain you, it's going to demean you, and ultimately leave you in a zombified, robotic, and controlled state. Because in the system, the only way that you can't be controlled by the systematic path is if you know your own life path and you know your own soul path. Because I mean, think about it, that's 2 against 1. But the consequence of that is once your soul wakes up and become aware of what's going on, and you finally get to that point where you're like, okay, I want to go ahead and start on this soul journey. Once you get aware of yourself like that, you become a threat to the makers of the systematic path, because the systematic path is all about keeping control over the soulless people, while at the same time using the solar energy of the people who do have souls as fuel to keep the system running. Kind of like you're stealing power from your neighbor's house because your lights got cut off, and everything is good as long as your neighbor don't come outside and look to the left, because if he does, he's going to find out that you've been stealing power from him, which is going to lead to a lot of consequences, and in the end it's going to lead to a bill that you can't pay, so you'll just be without no power. So to make sure that that doesn't happen, you do everything in your power to distract your neighbor. Every time they come out the house, you distract them and make sure that they don't look to the left. And when your neighbor comes out and talks to you about how high their electric bill is and how astronomical it is compared to everybody else in the neighborhood, you have to constantly keep making up lies and constantly keep making up reasons why he should not call the power people to the house to check on the house and see why there's so much power being extracted from that house, because if they come down, they're gonna let the neighbor know that you've been stealing power. So instead, you put lies in their head and tell them that, no, don't call the power people, because the power people, shoot, they're part of the problem. They ain't gonna do nothing but make your bill even higher when they come and look at the meter. Now, what is all of this saying in a more translated form? It's saying that when it comes to us black people, we already know that this system that we're brought into at an early age is only here to harm us. I mean, we pretty much should know by now what's at the end of the road if you're trying to win this systematic game. I mean, you go to school and pretty much much after elementary and middle school, for the most part, you just learning about stuff that wouldn't even really apply to you in the real world when it comes to you doing things that have to do with your life path or things that have to do with your soul path. So with the systematic path, the makers of the system trick you into believing that their path is not only your life path, but it's also the only path, which if you go through it with that mindset, that's the reason why you're so miserable and you feel disconnected from spirit, from the world, even from your own self. Because like I said, there's gonna be times in your life where your soul is gonna kind of wake up a little bit and see what's going on. And when your soul gets restless like that, that turns into depression, it turns into anxiety, and it turns to a lot of these negative emotions. And to different people, that's gonna play out in many different ways. And one thing that I really have to point out, energy-wise, is that any negative emotion that has to do with hatred, fear, jealousy, envy, gluttony, anxiety, depression, stress, all of these negative emotions, energy-wise, these emotions carry very high and very potent energy with it. Because think about if you're a positive person naturally, and think about how wrong someone has to do to you to make you angry at them, or think about how many muscles in your mouth and on your lips does it take for you to smile, and think about how many muscles it takes for you to frown. And that's the reason why people say that hating somebody is real hard work and it's stressful work, and that's why a lot of that stuff weighs on your heart and can give you a lot of heart problems and lower chakra problems and things like that. But in this systematic path that's not for us, that's what's supposed to happen, because at the end of the day, since the soulless beings that created the system don't have the main component that you need for that universal unconditional love, that divine feminine love that you can only experience if you have a soul. Instead, they feed off of that negative energy that you let off when this systematic path that wasn't even designed to go your way in the first place doesn't go your way. And I can go a lot deeper, but I'm just going to leave it right there for a minute. Now, usually in this cycle, if the person hasn't been too battered and too bruised by the default systematic path, and they decide to go their own way and they decide to find their own version of enlightenment, whatever that version of enlightenment is, the trick still is, if in that system where you're supposed to quote unquote find enlightenment, if it's not talking about cultivating and finding your own life path and delivering your own soul by going within, even though you think that you're out of the system, you're really still in the system. Because just like there are gods and goddesses to keep the overworld and the underworld going and things like that, there's also some spirits and some beings that are here to keep the systematic default path going as well. So that's why when you start to really go within, find out what your own life path is, and start going on that soul journey, that's why you're targeted so much by the system. Because little do you know, the system already knows about who you are, and a lot of times what you are and what you're supposed to do and what you can do. But once you find that out for yourself, in fear of you sharing that information with other people who the system may be quote unquote stealing power from, you have to be eliminated or silenced so that the system itself can keep going. Because if too many people unplug from the system will crash overnight. Because when you come into the industry, you're hungry, and since this systematic default path had you all your life pretty much on a diet of GMO foods, fats, oils, and sweets, no fruits, no vegetables, no balance at all, just all stuff that's bad for you, you truly don't know what a home cooked meal is really about, because you've never really experienced that side of the game before. I mean, all you see around you is fast food. When you cut on the TV, all you see is commercials for fast food. They don't advertise healthy living, or they don't advertise healthy eating. When you look at your friends all around you, all they're eating is fast food. Your mom and dad working themselves to death so much that a lot of times all you're eating is fast food because your mom is too tired to cook and your dad is too tired to cook. So if that's all that's around you and you don't know anything else, when you get into the industry and that label awards you with that big ass cupcake with the shit in the middle, you're thinking like, damn, I made it. Because on the outside, that cake smelled good. I mean, it smelled like it came fresh out the oven. It looked expensive. So you like, damn, I know this finna be good. But there's a few things that you're gonna have to sign first before they can just give it to you. And you wondering like, damn, like, bruh, like, it's just a cupcake. I gotta do all of this stuff just to get it? Like, dang. But since you're hungry and you're desperate and they've really sold you on how good this cupcake is, you go ahead with your naive self and sign the contract. Now, what you don't know is, not only is there shit in the cupcake, there's also parasites in that cupcake that you're eating. So as time goes on, those parasites are gonna start destroying you from the inside out. And every time that you feel a little sick or you feel a little weird, aka you start to get sick and tired of the industry dicking you around and treating you like crap, and you demand to do something about it, you go to the record executive and they say, oh, it's gonna be okay, we're gonna get back to you. Oh, by the way, here, have this car. Oh, by the way, here, have this chain, aka by the way, have another shit-filled cupcake. And it ends up getting to the point where eventually you're gonna start rejecting those shit-filled cupcakes that they're giving you, because at this point your body is riddled with so much parasites that you can't even function right. And everybody on the outside been saw it, but when you was in your groove and you was in your zone and people was trying to tell you that, yo man, something ain't right about you, man, you need to get away from whatever that it is that you're in that's got you like this, that parasite or those parasites that are living inside of you from those cupcakes alter you and make you believe that, no, it ain't nothing wrong with me, they just hating. No, it ain't nothing wrong with me, they just wish that they was in the position that I was in. No, it ain't nothing wrong with me, they just envious, they just jealous of me. But now you're really starting to see and feel yourself slowly dying. Now, while you're slowly dying, there's already someone else waiting in the wings that's hungry, that's desperate, just like you once was. And even though you're sick, and even though you're limping, and even though you're really trying to tell that person, look man, this shit ain't what you think, man, they just gonna give you some shitty cupcakes and they gonna play you, man, it ain't real, man, it ain't real, it's an illusion, man, it ain't real, turn back, you're gonna be looked at as crazy, and you're gonna be looked at as wash up, you're gonna be looked at as, oh, you fell off. So now you're hating on the new guy, or you're hating on the new girl that's on the rise, is what they think. But on the contrary, you're actually trying to warn them. But since they haven't been quote unquote initiated like you have, so they don't have the same spirit that you have, they'll never get it, unfortunately. And it's a cycle that keeps going on and on and on and on, getting worse and worse every time. And with the story of Aaliyah, it wasn't too much different. Now with Aaliyah, like I said before, with her not going rogue, going through that first stage and that second stage, getting those 2 6s that she got, Aaliyah has been a valuable commodity to the industry, but she was also a threat to the industry once she embodied that energy of Akasha the way she did, and she was really able to see things the way they truly were. Now with a lot of us average people who go through the paths the way they're supposed to be journeyed, we all come to that crossroads in our life. You know, some of us call it a midlife crisis, or some of us call it a period in which we're trying to quote unquote find ourselves. We come to that place where we have to really make a decision about, are we gonna keep going in this system and have our souls stay asleep until we die and then it wakes up in the afterlife, or are we going to wake up in this realm while we're still alive and work towards that soul path, that life path, so that we won't have to reincarnate on earth again to do it right. So once Aaliyah was aware of what she got herself into industry wise, because remember, Aaliyah was in the industry, or Aaliyah was introduced into the industry when she was extremely young, and I truly feel like because of free will she had that same crossroads choice. But the difference between Aaliyah and a lot of other people is, while the industry was raising her up due to stardom, behind the scenes she was raising herself up spiritually as well. So when she was at the rise of her career musically, she was also at the rise of her spirituality. So on a solar level, with her becoming Akasha and Queen of the Dam, she prematurely completed her soul path on this earth, because like I said on my very first podcast in this series, there were certain energies that Aaliyah was meant to introduce back into the world, and with her being in Hollywood and playing in those movies and making the music that she did, she completed that task. Now unfortunately, even though she had a life path that involved her having children and her being a wife and her going on a totally different journey, kind of like a Sade type of journey, Sade Adu. If Aaliyah would have been still alive in her 30s, she probably would have been like a Yemoya, great enlightened mother type of being, in a small way, kind of like how Erykah Badu is when it comes to being a spiritual mother in the industry. But like I said before, you following your life path is a huge detriment to the system, because anything that you do in your life path requires for your soul to be activated in a way, and as long as you're doing things that require your soul, those things are prohibited in the means of the system, because since the system is created by soulless beings, there's no way that they're going to be able to use that polarity of energy. So the thing that a lot of artists don't know, and they really don't care about it really until it happens, but you blindly going into the industry and you don't know what your life path is and you don't know what your soul path is. If you find that out while you're in the industry, while you've signed these contracts and took these oaths and made these agreements, you realize that your life path is now pretty much permanently glued to whatever systematic agenda that your music or whatever you do is going to be a part of. And that alone is one of the most miserable feelings in your life. I call it the J. Cole curse. The J. Cole curse is when you go into the industry real young, or you go into the industry naive, and for a long time those parasites that you had in your body from eating all those shitty cupcakes that the industry gave you, they have you pushing the agenda of the system. And then something happens to where you decide to detox yourself. You get some occult knowledge, some information from a master teacher, or you go within and you get your own Akashic record reading done. But while you're in the system, just like J. Cole, you'll really start to see how much of a powerful godly being that you truly are, and you'll also see how much of a detriment that you've been to your own people with the systematic default message that you've been pushing with your energy. So just like any person who's seen that they've been walking with a pile of mess behind them all this time, they start to clean up their image, they start to make more positive music, and they start to try to change their life around to a more holistic type of life, dealing with their soul path and their spiritual path and their life path. But one thing that they forgot was that contract that they signed, it was in blood, my brother. It was in blood, my sister. And there's really no getting out of something like that unless you came into the game with some power. So you see a lot of these celebrities dying tragically and very unexpected. Now, I'm not saying that J. Cole is going to be like this, but just looking at the artists in our past, it's something that's very prevalent. Now, in Aaliyah's case, on a spiritual level and on a soul level, she knew what she wanted to be on this earth, and in a lot of ways she knew what she had to transform into on this earth, and she already came to terms with that. Now, a lot of what she didn't know was that on the flip side, on the dark side, her soul was already quote unquote sold into the industry at an early age. So just like Obanani, all of the energy and all of the gifts that she was trying to bring onto the world to help us, the industry took that Lilith side of her and that young Akasha side of her, when that dark divine feminine energy was still in its potent and primal form, that form where most of the teenage women her age will be able to relate to, and even a lot of the older women will be able to relate to. The industry made sure to take that image of her and over sexualize it as much as they could. So looking at it in that standpoint, when Aaliyah was about to really change her life and really change the game when it came to the new stuff that she was about to drop about female empowerment, talking about the gods and goddesses and doing some of those things like what Michael Jackson was doing when he made that video, Remember the Time. That energy, it would have been very needed and progressive for us, but for the system, that would have been bad for business. So on a business standpoint, she needed to go because she already served her purpose. So yeah, even if you finish for the most part what your solar path is, you always have a chance to follow your life path, because since life is always evolving, your life path through different parts of your life is going to evolve too. But if you sign any type of extenuating contract or anything like that, unless you come with some spiritual power to get out of it, because we wrestle not against flesh and blood. So I'm not just talking about physical contracts, I'm talking about spiritual contracts as well. When you sign that contract, your life path is whatever that default system that you're in tells you it is. And once you start to rebel against that, you're pretty much violating your terms and conditions, and the wages of that is death. Now, with Aaliyah's case, she knew enough about the underworld and she knew enough about the occult knowledge to save herself, because the one thing that she told me was she didn't feel no pain during the crash because she was already gone before the plane even fell all the way to the ground. When you look at Aaliyah's autopsy report, in her coroner report, it shows that she died because she had a blow to the head and burns sustaining the crash, but what really killed her, or what really caused for the transition to happen, was cardiac arrest because of her heart. And it's very symbolic that she died on the day that she did, because that shows us that not only did she have to sacrifice her life, or she had to sacrifice her life path in order to be deified as Akasha, she's choosing now to open up those services in the underworld, in the inner world, to us, so that way we can receive that true enlightenment from knowing who you really are. And to be honest with you, the energy has always been on the planet for us. It's just that with her doing the things that she did, she opened up that portal to where where any of us who has soul and who can connect with Aaliyah's music can easily go into that realm and get those questions answered that you've been pondering over for your whole lifetime, and finally get the clarity that you need where you can move on and start acting in your own life path and your own soul path. So the reason why she left so soon was because she finished her life path too soon, and due to the industry and as well as her own personal choice, she decided that it would be more feasible not only to us as a people but for the universe in general for her to embody that energy of Akasha and take that energy with her to the underworld where she can be a ambassador of that energy, so that lost souls who's looking for that guidance and who's looking for that answer that they've been looking for, and they can't find it in the default system that they're in, and they can't find it outside of themselves, they can turn on an Aaliyah record and listen to her music and watch her movies and get some of that energy for themselves, and then go to sleep and meditate and have those answers miraculously given to you. And you may not know what the energy is called, and you may not even be into the occult, or you may not even be into the esoteric knowledge, but this energy can still affect you too in a positive light because of what Aaliyah did. Now, with all of that being said, y'all, I did not expect for this podcast to be this long already. I mean, damn, I'm still not even finished talking about this stuff, but not to worry, because Akasha gave me so much stuff to talk about, and since this podcast is way too long already, I'm just gonna end up maybe doing another podcast next week if y'all want me to, talking about some of this stuff in regards to why the world is in the state that it's in right now, what we can do as melanated people to change it, and a few other things as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and end this right here. I hope that you all got something from this, because man, even though I stopped it right here, there's still so much that I want to talk about, and sometimes I'll be trying to fit all of this information into one podcast, and sometimes it just don't work out like that. But just like I did with the last podcast, there's something that Akasha really wanted me to get out on this podcast before I go, because I asked her about the state of Black America as it is now, and what can we do to turn this whole thing around? Now, I'm going to end up making a whole podcast about all of this stuff, but I just want to give y'all a small little tidbit of it right now, just so you can know how I'm coming on this next podcast. Now, what she told me the answer to this is real simple. Now, this is one of those sayings that I've been hearing like all of my life, and I'm like, I've always heard different variations of it, like all is fair in love and war, and I'm a lover, not a fighter, all of these type of variations of it. But one thing that Akasha really pointed out to me was the one thing that's being used to our detriment now, which is our potent sexual energy. This is the type of energy that we cultivated and we praised it, and we was using this energy in its divine form back in the times of Kemet, and even before then, even earlier, even more ancient times. Sex was always looked at as a universal spiritual soul communication mechanism, because for a lot of people who don't know this, sex is an acronym, Sacred Energy Exchange. And as a people, back when we knew who we were, we held sex at a very high regard, because we knew that as a melanated people, meaning that we have a special component inside of us that directly connects us to the cosmos and directly connects us to the universe. A massive amount of that type of sexual energy directed into a certain place can cause a cosmic change in the universe, as well as elemental changes on Earth, and as well as physical changes on Earth. Now, as ancients, we knew that not only was our bodies a temple, but we also acknowledged that the woman's womb is a portal for spirits to come through and live on this physical plane. So as a holistic couple, not only did you know the spiritual and mental forms of birth control, to where you can have sex and not have unwanted pregnancies when it was time and you did have a partner that you wanted to try to have a child with. Our ancient ancestors knew how to sync together their intentions during sex. They was able to sync and pretty much communicate and tell the universe what type of spirit that they want to inhabit that mother's womb, so that spirit can grow up and be a light being. Because when you're operating in a place of love during sex, you have what you call a love child. But if you're out here just having sex all willy-nilly, and you and that woman don't have no type of spiritual attachment to each other, because y'all already have a soul tie, and I'm gonna talk about that in the next podcast. But we living in a society to where not only do we not properly know how to have sex, but we're having sex all willy-nilly with no intentions. So when you do that, and neither you all are righteous, so neither you all have righteous energy inside of you that you're sending up to the universe, what kind of portal do you think you're opening up when that woman gets pregnant? It's kind of like you're playing Russian roulette, because you don't know what type of spirit is gonna hop in that womb. But for the most part, on that type of level, since you're having low vibrational sex, you're gonna be attracting low vibrational spirits, and you wonder why you got a bunch of bad, disobedient, and loud and rambunctious baby kids running around. Because that's the energy that you put out subconsciously when you had that unconscious, unintentional type of sex. And in layman's terms, that means the people who were born out of love versus the people who were born from a fuck. Now, it's no saying that every person who's born out of love gonna turn out to be a being of light, because in my next podcast I'm gonna talk about the pros and cons of being a light being. But that rebellious baby kid, if that child can get some real alpha male type of energy, real stable type of energy around them, they turn into what you call warrior gods and warrior goddesses. And these are some of the most fiercest, some of the most cutthroat, and some of the most courageous people. But as you would imagine, they have their pros and cons as well. And one thing that Akasha was telling me was, we have in this world too many rogue warriors and not enough peacemakers. But as soon as we start to restore that balance by looking at us having sex as conjuring up that perfect king or that perfect queen, or conjuring up that fierce warrior god, or conjuring up that fierce warrior goddess, and we start to look at each other as brothers in arms and sisters in arms, and we start to look at our families as miniature armies fighting this spiritual battle, we're really going to start to see that turnaround that everybody likes to talk about in the conscious community. All right, y'all, so I'm gonna stop it right there. Man, I know that was a huge earful of information there, so I'm gonna stop and let all that soak in. Thanks for watching this BandClap TV podcast. As I always say, if you can, donate. It helps me out, and it also helps me to be able to bring other people on so we can all chop it up and have a dialogue about this. So just putting it out there, my next video may be entitled Light Beings versus Warrior Gods and the War on Innocence. So y'all be looking out for that. Shout out to all of my new subscribers. Shout out to Masterly Foolish, who's always uploading my content. I really appreciate you all for that. And until next time, BandClap TV, we out.